Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Tom Woods Show, episode 2537. I'm here with the great Murray Sabrin, who is, are you Professor Emeritus now? Do you have that?
Well, for the past 3.5 years. So that's the good news.
Okay. So Murray taught finance for, and I should have doggone it, Murray. Why didn't I ask you this before we went on the air? But it's a long time, right?
35 years, half a lifetime.
Half a lifetime. And he's been a political candidate more than once and in more than one party. And we'll have something to say about that. But he's been around a while. He's followed the issues that you and I care about very closely. He's been a longtime colleague of Ron Paul. He writes a great Substack, keeping up on what's going on these days, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I want to check in with him on what's going on. He is the sponsor. He and his wife are sponsoring a Mises Institute event on November 9th that we'll talk about as well. So this guy just works and works and works for the cause of truth. So welcome back to the old Tom Woods Show there, Murray.
Well, great to be with you. Now that we're both in Florida, I made the move 3 years ago. It's like a breath of fresh air because the air is a lot fresher than New Jersey, I can tell you that.
Well, I remember one time, we'll get into all these important topics in just a minute, but one time you and I had lunch together in Florida, and it was at Sweet Tomatoes. You remember that?
That one of the favorite places to eat by far. I mean, it's probably the greatest value that I've ever seen in the restaurant business.
So it's a soup and salad place, and it did not survive COVID. It closed all over the place, just closed because a salad bar was going to kill your grandmother, so you can't go get food at the salad bar. But it's a wonderful place, and I just want to tell you, Murray, that they're little by little they're coming back, and that just a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were at the one location that has indeed rebuilt and opened, and that is in Tucson, Arizona. And we ate there, and I was having flashbacks to my meal with old Murray Sabrin.
Well, there's one not far from us that closed down in Naples, and I just hope it opens up because it was just one of the great experiences that I had. It's probably, as I said, a salad, soup, desserts for like $12, $11. I mean, you can't beat that.
No, you sure can't. So, all right, so I'm going to go in reverse order, actually. I'm going to start in the present, and then we're going to actually make our way back into the past. So we've got just a crazy election cycle this time around, because of course we've now had the interesting news about RFK Jr. suspending but not actually terminating his campaign, he says, because he is simply taking his name off the ballot in 10 battleground states, but keeping it on in the others, because he says he just does not want to be a spoiler for the current Democratic Party, which he simply cannot abide. And I listened to the speech that he gave about this, and I have to say, even though, needless to say, I don't have to look very far to find areas of disagreement with RFK Jr., that was a masterful political speech, in my opinion.
I was applauding it as I heard it, and the interesting thing is, as he was talking about Big Pharma, I was watching on Fox News, they cut away. What a surprise. I mean, Big Pharma controls the media because of all the ads they place on TV. And that's one of the reasons I was told that Tucker Carlson got canned, because he was having people on criticizing Big Pharma and COVID and all the shots that they were promoting. And so when I heard his speech, I think RFK Jr. has an opportunity to do what I think his father and uncle wanted to do, create a peaceful world. And everyone should listen to JFK's June 1963 commencement address at American University. I told Bob Murphy about it a few months ago, and he listened to it. And it is probably the most pro-peace, libertarian-oriented foreign policy speech I've heard of any president. And I urge all your listeners to go to it. It's on YouTube. And 5 months later, what happened? He was assassinated. So we know that correlation is not causation, but I'll tell you something, Tom, having lived through that period, JFK really wanted to get us out of Vietnam and create détente with the Soviet Union. That's basically what his speech was about, détente with the Soviet Union.
The JFK assassination, I know there are a ton of suspicious things about it, but it's one of those things where, there's an entire industry dedicated to it. I mean, I don't know how many books have been written on that subject. So it's one of these topics that I haven't even known where to start in, because even among our friends, we have differences of opinion.
Right.
Which of these 8 zillion books do I need to read? I don't even know. So I've stayed agnostic on it because I don't even know how to insert myself into the scholarship on the subject. Have you taken a stance on it?
Oh, yeah. The one book that I think is the best that I've read out of all the books that are out there is someone who was interviewed by Lou Rockwell several years ago. I think it's Jack Douglas, Why Kennedy Died and Why It Matters, something to that effect. And it's a riveting book with like 600 footnotes. And he points out that there is evidence that the CIA conspired with other elements in the American government to get rid of Kennedy because he prevented the invasion of Cuba after the failed Bay of Pigs. He wanted to have détente with the Soviet Union. And the mafia, of course, didn't like him because Bobby Kennedy was going after the mafia as Attorney General. And you know what the best evidence is? That it was a conspiracy, and Lee Harvey Oswald was the patsy. When Lee Harvey Oswald was in the Dallas police station, he said, "No one has charged me with the crime." Think of this, Tom. If your goal as an assassin is to kill the person you wanted to kill, and that person is dead, wouldn't you be saying, "Hey, I beat the Secret Service, I beat the FBI, I beat the police force, and I killed the president"? He didn't say any of that. In other words, if he wanted to be the true martyr of killing a president, he would have been ecstatic about saying that, and he didn't. So we know from Lee Harvey Oswald's own words that he had nothing to do with it, in the sense that he didn't plan or he didn't execute the assassination.
Well, as I say, do you have any thoughts though on the RFK assassination? Because I know equally little about that.
Yeah, there have been reports that Sirhan was in front of RFK, and the shots that killed RFK came from the back. And someone posted recently, I forgot which website it was, because there are so many websites that are out there that have information, that Sirhan supposedly, allegedly, was hypnotized in some government program, and he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe at the right place at the right time, and they pinned it on him. And RFK Jr., I think, met with Sirhan and wants to release him from prison, but the government will have none of that because they don't want to keep these events from the American people. The truth of these events, which happened, 56 years ago, the year I graduated from college and the year I got married. So 1968 was a monumental year in my lifetime.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, let's take it back to the present and RFK and Trump and Harris. The speech he gave was great. He's now taken this issue of chronic disease, which was not. I mean, he's done for chronic disease what Ron Paul did for the Federal Reserve.
Absolutely.
It wasn't anywhere, and now it's somewhere.
Listen, I've written 2 books on healthcare. You can see them on the back of my shoulder. One is on how to create universal healthcare using free market principles, and then how to finance healthcare for the entrepreneurs. And the evidence, Tom, is so overwhelming that the American people are getting sicker and sicker, even though we have all these drugs out there. And over 40% of the American adults are obese. By 2030, it's going to be 50%. And here's the dirty secret about medical care in the United States that no one wants to talk about. It's nearly $5 trillion annual cost to the American people. We are over-medicated and over-insured. And I have a longtime friend who is a naturopath, and he's given me great advice over the years. And that's the way to go. Is we have our immune system, and then we need to build up our immune system to fight off illnesses. And that's what, if people did that during COVID would have been just an annual flu event. Instead, people got these shots, which turned out to be very problematic for a lot of people, young people especially. And we know there's an increase in cancer and heart disease and all sorts of other problems. And so chronic illness is the number one issue that could bring down Medicare and Medicaid, because the American people are not getting the proper information, the proper nutrition, and our food supply is very tainted, to say the least. And so we've got to go back to what works, what grandma told us about. I didn't have a grandma because they were killed during World War II, but what parents and grandparents told you: eat natural foods as much as possible, drink enough water, get sunshine, get fresh air. These are the simple solution to maintaining decent health.
Did you happen to see the rather curt message that some family members of RFK made to the public about his decision?
Yeah, I saw his younger sister, I forgot her name. She was born the year Kennedy was assassinated in 1968. Mrs. Kennedy was pregnant with her. And I couldn't believe that she got on, either it was at CNN or MSNBC, which of course likes to undermine anyone who criticizes the current narrative about medical care in the United States. And I thought that was kind of disrespectful of her older brother, who is out there trying to make life better for the American people, not using the government to do so for the most part, but just saying, hey, we've got these issues of vaccinations that pose problems for youngsters and adults, and our food supply needs to be addressed. And so for them to go out and talk about his role in politics, I thought was incredibly disrespectful, given the fact that what RFK Jr. is now talking about is peace, which his father and uncle were killed for because they were so determined to bring peace to the world, especially during the Cold War and the Vietnam War. At the height of the Vietnam War, RFK was killed.
Well, I'll just be blunt about it. These are disgusting people, and they are so terrified of being associated with Trump that they publicly betray a family member. You don't ever do that, and they don't at any time address any of his arguments. Yeah. It's just you should have faith in Harris and Walz. And then to add insult to injury, they say that they have a vision of a future defined by individual freedom, and then they list a couple of other things. But individual freedom?
My God. I mean, you talk about an Orwellian approach to politics. I mean, I'm listening to the Democratic Convention. Thankfully, I didn't listen to many of them, but Kamala Harris saying our campaign is about freedom is laughable. It's a joke. It's an insult to anyone who's written about freedom from the perspective of individual liberty, property rights, limited government. I mean, it's just amazing how the Democratic Party should change its name to the Fascist Party. And Trump and RFK and Vance should say the Democrats have gone from the Democratic Party of mild welfare state into full-blown fascism. That's what they should say. And I think the American people would find out what fascism means. It means what America's evolved to over the past 100 years.
You know, I have this saying that and you have I don't know if it's an amendment to it or an addition to it, but I made this statement some years ago and it really stuck. It was that no matter which candidate you vote for, no matter whom you vote for, you get John McCain when it comes to foreign policy. And you have, let's say the Sabrin corollary to the Woods Law, which is that we always get FDR/LBJ's domestic policies, regardless of which person we elect. And there is something to that. That may go 10% farther than I would go, but I definitely understand where that's coming from. You can look at George W. Bush. You can look at George H.W. Bush. You can look at Richard Nixon, and even maybe in a handful of cases, even Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
But comment on this, especially as somebody who's run for office, who kind of knows the GOP a little bit from the inside. That might seem like a startling thing to say. I mean, we have democracy. We have these two wildly different candidates. And so how can you say that no matter which one we choose, we get the same outcome?
Well, by that I mean, Tom, is that no one is challenging the constitutionality of the three mega programs, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I mean, I've been talking about this for decades. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution outlines the authorized policies or programs of the federal government, and none of those are authorized. Medical care is not part of the federal government's mandate in the Constitution. Then, of course, you have the Department of Energy, Education, Commerce. Just go down the list of all the departments we have, cabinet offices. None of them are authorized by the Constitution. And years ago, decades ago, people had a greater respect for the Constitution. How do we know that? Well, when the prohibitionists wanted to ban alcohol, they couldn't get a law passed because the Constitution didn't authorize them. So we got the 18th Amendment, which gave the federal government the ability to ban the manufacture and sale of alcohol. Same thing when 1895, when the Supreme Court ruled that a direct income tax was unconstitutional because it's not authorized. So we got the 16th Amendment that authorized the federal government, gave the federal government the authority to directly tax incomes. So years ago, in a different era, people respected the Constitution. Today, we are living, I think, in a constitutional crisis, because if you look at the federal budget and what is authorized, as I think Judge Napolitano pointed out when he had his Fox show, that 90% of federal spending is unauthorized. So therefore, what do we do as libertarians, as constitutional conservatives who want to live in a world without the overhang of all the spending and taxes?
Folks, some of the most successful people I know are in my elite mastermind, and at a recent meeting, I overheard a couple of them talking about how much they like crowd health. One said to the other, "My wife's hip replacement surgery was $500, and that was it." Now look, American health insurance is frustrating and expensive. Claims denials are becoming more common. And can I take a wild guess that the Affordable Care Act hasn't actually made your care more affordable? Well, that's why Crowd Health was created. It's not health insurance. It's a better way to pay for health care through crowdfunding. Because let's face it, your insurance policy is opaque and full of unpleasant surprises, and your premiums are going up every year. You wind up feeling taken advantage of. Crowd Health is doing things differently. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months. Go to joincrowdhealth.com/woods. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com/woods. That's joincrowdhealth.com/woods. I'm going to ask you a question that seems like out of the blue, but I am curious to know a little bit about it. How is it possible, you have a PhD,
Right.
that your doctoral dissertation had as one of its advisors Murray Rothbard himself?
Right. Well,
did you know him?
The wonderful thing about that was when I started learning about libertarianism in the early 1970s, I mean, really early, 71, 72, and in 1969, I read Ayn Rand's Capitalism and Freedom, and Alan Greenspan's wonderful essay, Golden Economic Freedom, was in there. And I put that aside for a while. And then when I went to graduate school full-time in 1972, I started getting interested in monetary issues and inflation, because we had wage price controls in 71. They were lifted in 73, and inflation took off. We had the oil crisis. And I started reading a little bit about Rothbard. He wrote a piece, I think, from the New York Times Magazine. And then I came across For a New Liberty in 1974 or 73. And I wrote him a letter and met him at Brooklyn Polytech, where he was teaching. And I was allowed, as a Rutgers doctoral student, to bring in one outside member of the university onto my dissertation committee. So I wrote him, didn't get a response. And I said, let me go meet him at Brooklyn Polytech. I did. I sat in on his class. And then I got an invitation a few weeks later to join the first Austrian Economics Conference in June of 1974 in South Royalton, which we talked about at the Mises event in March of this year, the 50th anniversary. And so reading everything I could that he wrote, that Mises wrote about money and banking and what has government done to our money, which of course the Mises Institute is giving away for free now, my eyes opened up as to what this question of inflation, recession, a boom-bust cycle is all about. And I just used that information to put together a dissertation about how inflation spreads through the U.S. economy from 1967 to 71. And he was really indispensable in helping me get that dissertation through.
And now, I guess we could say that after the 70s, we went through a period where people understood that prices seemed to go up little by little here and there, but price inflation was not a big major political issue the way it had been in the 70s.
Right.
There were people like us who warned about it, and who said that even if the official inflation rate for your consumer goods is very low, is still the cumulative effect of that over 30 years, if you're saving for your retirement, it will decimate that even at these low rates.
Yep.
But now all of a sudden everybody's talking about it because it's right in our faces. And yet when people are asked, politicians, well, what will you do about inflation? Price inflation? What will you do about it? None of them are going to talk about monetary policy.
No.
So
No.
Is there anything short of doing something about monetary policy that can nevertheless have positive effects in terms of bringing consumer prices down?
Well, one thing people can do is, again, this may sound trite, but this is what I personally do now that my wife and I are both retired, is that we really are very careful shoppers, especially at the supermarket. And other costs we try to keep down. Fortunately, we don't drive to work or anything like that, so gasoline price is not a problem. But let me tell you something that no one is talking about. No one has ever talked about this as far as I know. The CPI is gravely flawed, Tom, and I think it understates inflation for a very simple reason. There are things in the CPI measured every month that we don't buy regularly, such as used cars or new cars or single-family houses or condos. In other words, things that we buy on a regular basis: food, clothing, shelter, rent, insurance, CPA things, cell phone service. Things that we buy on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis should be in a CPI. Things that I call consumer capital goods, things that have a long life, like TVs and computers, things like that, should not be in the CPI. They should be a separate category of consumer capital goods and see how those prices go over time. And in my lifetime, the price of TVs have plummeted. The price of computers have plummeted. That's the great news of how technology makes things available to the average person. I mean, even people who are low income have cell phones. I mean, you see the kids that are going in San Francisco and robbing the stores. They all have cell phones. So we know that that's not an obstacle for low income people to get high quality, high technology goods. And so we have to have a real evaluation of the CPI. But in the meantime, you really have to be a good shopper. I mean, we shop at CVS, so every month they send us coupons to take advantage of lower prices. And we go to Publix, so what do? Every week they have buy one, get one free, or buy two and get one free. So you buy things that have a long shelf life, and you could save quite a bit of money over the course of the year. Same thing with Costco. And you buy things that are on sale. We buy certain items every month, every 2 months. And over the course of a year, you could probably save several hundred, if not several $1,000s, depending upon the size of your family. And that's the way you really take advantage of what retailers are offering, because they know, Tom, that if they raise prices too much, they're going to lose sales. I mean, this is the elasticity of demand concept. And they know that they have to keep prices down. And Target and other retailers have announced price cuts on some of the items that went up a lot in price. So they're now reducing it in order to get the consumer back into the stores.
You ran for office a couple of times. So I want to talk about that for a minute. But there are some people in our world who would say that that there's no point in voting. You shouldn't bother voting. Do you fall into that camp? And if not, why not?
Well, I haven't voted consistently. I voted most of the time. I'll tell you right off front, I didn't vote for Trump in 2016 or 2020. In 2016, I went to the polling place. I still didn't know who I was going to vote for. Not that I was going to vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016, but the line was so long down the street from my polling place, and I had a meeting to go to. I said, I can't wait. Then in 2020, I think because of his COVID regulations and all that, I just couldn't vote for him. But I intend to vote this year. Who, again, I don't know. I think given the fact that RFK Jr. is with Trump now and talking about issues that I think we can relate to as libertarians and may have an impact on healthcare, maybe even monetary policy. I just sent Roger Stone a link to what has government done to our money. So hopefully he gets that to Trump and Vance and say, this is what you guys should be advocating.
I wouldn't hold my breath.
The Fed is the problem. And the Trump thinks he can manage interest rates better than the Fed. So that's, I think, Trump being Trump, is that he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. But from what I gather, he's not well read. And reading Rothbard's What Has the Government Done to Our Money, I think would be extremely helpful to his campaign.
Hey, everybody, we talk a lot about parallel institutions. We say we've got a lot of sick institutions doing all kinds of crazy things in our society, and the free market will devise alternatives. And sometimes we think, I'm not so sure that's really going to happen. Well, as a matter of fact, it is happening. Because increasingly, Google, Microsoft, Apple, Zoom, you name it, they think your private data is their playground for their advertising networks and AI systems. Well, one way you can avoid all those things is not using the quote-unquote free tools big tech wants you to use. Federated Computer is the answer, because Federated Computer offers a full replacement for Google, Microsoft Office 365, Slack, Zoom, all the tools of big tech, but designed for people who care about privacy, don't want to be treated like cattle, and want a great price. Everything's encrypted end-to-end, fully backed up daily. We're talking about private email, file storage, group chat, WordPress, all the applications you need for your business or team, all bundled into one easy monthly subscription that's 10 times less expensive than big tech offerings. You get unlimited users, fantastic personal customer service from real human beings, and the assurance that your data is your data and not big tech's. Well, visit www.federated.computer for your free 30-day trial and use coupon code WOODS for 10% off your first 6 months. So how about that? A company that thinks its job is to provide you with services for a great price rather than spying on you or shutting you up and manipulating you. Take your first step with other Happy Woods listeners towards digital freedom. Visit www.federated.computer today for your free 30-day trial and use coupon code WOODS for 10% off your first 6 months. Okay, so you're not one of the, because I know what the arguments are.
Yeah.
And, you know, what's his name? The no treason guy. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Lysander Spooner?
Lysander Spooner. Spooner thought that it was absolutely morally acceptable to vote, certainly as a self-defense mechanism. There's no reason. So I don't. So I always say, if I'm in a concentration camp and the guard comes to me and says, you can vote on whether you get released, and if a majority of you say that you want to be released, we'll let you go. Could you imagine somebody saying, on principle, I won't participate in your election? Okay, then don't, but I want to get out. So I don't mind that.
Sure.
But after having run for office, but particularly in the Republican Party, do you feel like that you learned any lessons from it, or did you become more cynical, or what would you say?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in New Jersey, the process is totally corrupt because you have these county lines, which I think the courts just ruled unconstitutional, where the county people have this highly desirable line, because then all the political hacks in that county tend to vote for the people on that line. And if you don't get that line, it's very difficult to get the nomination. But people have won the nomination without being on the line. But in New Jersey, again, I can only speak from my experience in New Jersey, the Republicans in New Jersey are no different than most Democrats around the country, except for a handful of conservative Republicans who have libertarian leanings. Most Republicans are not interested in individual rights, property rights, or anything like that. Christy Whitman, who I ran against in 97, she's the prototypical rhino in terms of she's a Republican in name only. When I ran against her, she couldn't even deregulate auto insurance in 1997. And guess what? 4 years later, when Jim McGreevey, a Democrat, got elected, who was in that same race in 97, he deregulated auto insurance, which I called for in 97. So the point I make, Tom, as a third-party candidate, is you don't have to win in order to get some of your ideas enacted. In fact, if you read the 1912 Socialist Party platform, which you can read online, virtually everything's enacted by Democrats primarily and by some Republicans.
Was the last time you ran was for U.S. Senate?
U.S. Senate as a libertarian in 2018. And of course, that was a tough haul because there was no financial support coming from the libertarians within the state. And the reason I did so well in 97 as a libertarian gubernatorial candidate is that there was a fundraising letter sent out in mid-August of 97 to meet a deadline of raising $210,000, which is the threshold to get matching funds, which would require me to be in the debates with the Republican and Democratic nominees. We raised $180,000 in 2 weeks. It was a remarkable achievement because libertarians all across the country came to my aid. I got into 3 debates, and I showed how foolish the Democratic and Republican approaches were to government. And here's something about a third party. A week before the election, I was polling in double digits, Tom, 10 and 12% in the polls. And then because the race was so tight, people broke for either Whitman or McGreevey because they didn't want to see the other candidate win. And so I got just under 5%, but we had an impact in terms of the 65 speed limit. I was for it. The others were against it. 6 months after Whitman was reelected, she raised the speed limit to 65. We struck a blow for free speech because my town had an ordinance saying you could not put a political sign on your lawn. We sued the town, and now that's part of case law in New Jersey that you're allowed to have a political sign on your own front lawn.
Well, how about that? I don't think I don't even know if I ever had a Ron Paul sign, but I had a bumper sticker, and I felt really good about that.
Yeah.
Everybody behind me was getting a taste of that. And to this day, we travel a lot. My wife has a Ron Paul Revolution bumper sticker on her suitcase that everybody sees. And I have this secret feeling that that's inspiring somebody, but probably not. But would you recommend political activism in the sense of actually running for office? Or would you say it has to be the right kind of person or the right kind of circumstances? I mean, what kind of advice would you give?
It has to be the circumstances. And in 2014, I ran for the U.S. Senate in the Republican primary when there was no, quote, top-tier candidate in there. And Jeff Bell, who ran against Bill Bradley in 1978 for the U.S. Senate and lost to Bradley, which launched his political career, he came back to New Jersey. And since he was known among the establishment Republicans, he won the nomination. I thought I had a chance to win that one. Because I got some good feedback from people within the Christie administration, but Christie undermined my nomination because he was going to run in 2016, and so was Rand Paul, and he thought if I was going to have a big show in 2014, I would not be with him in 2016, and therefore he wouldn't want to have a Republican in the state of New Jersey who had a high-profile election, probably not winning against Cory Booker, but someone who would be well-known within the state, not supporting him. So he did everything he could to undermine my candidacy. That's why I don't have much love for old Christie.
Yeah, completely understood. So what do you think happens? Here's a question this is kind of an oddball question, but I'm thinking about. As I said, I travel a lot, and for several years, my wife's wanted to go to New Orleans. And I know people are going to write to me and say, New Orleans is a dump, you shouldn't go there. But they're going to say that about any city that I suggest. There are some nice things in New Orleans, and she's interested in going. And so we happened to schedule the week of November 1st, just at random, because we basically plan out our travel at the beginning of the year. November 1st, we're going to spend the week in New Orleans. But that includes November 3rd, which is Election Day. And I'm wondering, do I actually have to be concerned about the possibility of unrest and rioting such that I should stay away from New Orleans? I mean, do you have any instinct? I realize I'm putting you on the spot a little bit off topic.
Yeah. I mean, traveling during election season, especially this year, is very problematic. I mean, it may be quiet as a church mouse in the cathedral, or it could be very chaotic. We don't know anything. I mean, it's hard to predict that. But I like to stay away from traveling at times where there could be incidents around the country, and hopefully there won't be, but we haven't traveled in quite a while for reasons that we've discussed in the past, but I like to travel at off times because traveling holidays is really difficult at the airports. You have endless waits and endless delays, and so you like to travel when either in the spring or in the fall when the kids are not traveling and not many people are going to places that you want to go to. So, I think traveling during election week this year could be something that you may regret if it happens. So the following week or the week after, just before Thanksgiving, I guess, it'll be pretty quiet. Or the first week in December after Thanksgiving is probably a good time to go as well.
Right before Thanksgiving, I'm going to Argentina.
Oh, nice.
I should have switched these two trips around. Put the New Orleans one for later, but anyway, this is my personal problem. We're not going to spend too much time on that. Let's say, before we do anything else, let's take a minute, tell people about what's going on November 9th. This is 2024 as we're recording this, and then we'll continue.
Yeah, this is exciting. This is our second sponsorship of a Mises Circle in Fort Myers, and it's going to be in the Marriott Sanibel right before you get to the causeway that takes you to Sanibel. And it's going to be about the election and the economy. So this will be right after the election. Tom DiLorenzo, the president of the Institute, who has written some of the great books on the economy and the history, Mark Thornton, and I want to pronounce her name correctly, Wanjiru Nijoya, who's a senior fellow at the Institute, and I will be speaking about the what we can expect over the next 4 years. It depends on who gets elected, and given my corollary to the great Woods axiom about John McCain and foreign policy, I don't think it's going to matter much, quite frankly, unless Harris gets in and she has a Democratic Congress and they go hog wild. But you know what, Tom? There's feedback. It's called the stock market. It's called the financial markets. It's called the foreign exchange markets. It's called the bond market. And they would tank if they do something that is really egregious for the economy. And so I'm not that concerned about a Harris presidency. Obviously, she's embraced the neocon view of foreign policy. That's really an issue for me. So there's no way I would ever vote for a Democrat. I haven't voted for a Democrat, Tom, since 1968 when I first voted for Hubert Humphrey for president. That was the last time I voted for a Democrat, since I grew up in a Democratic household and voted for Humphrey. But this conference or this meetup, I think, is going to be really insightful because you have two great economists and this new senior fellow at the Beeson Institute. And I'll give my take about the financial markets and talk about spending, which is really the key issue, spending. And Trump has alluded to it recently in the talk. He said, there's too much spending, there's too much waste. Well, we know there's waste in government, but what he should be talking about is, are these programs sustainable? He said we won't touch Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, which it means that we're going to get FDR and LBJ if Trump is elected in November.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a couple things to say about that. First, I think I've made peace with the fact that the spending's never going to be brought under control. I've just made peace with it. As I was growing up, I thought eventually sensible people will come together and figure out, obviously, these big programs are on an unsustainable trajectory. We're going to figure out a way to fix this, to exit from them or to do something that's politically feasible, and that didn't happen. Not going to happen. There's just, believe it or not, there's no constituency for it at all.
Yeah,
none. Yeah. And Trump has no interest in it. The Democrats have no interest in it. The neocons pretend to have an interest in it, like they'll have a Paul Ryan make a stern speech, but then the stern speech is the end of it, as far as they're concerned. So that's one thing. I can't remember what the other thing was. Here's what the other thing is. Here's the reason to be concerned about Harris, even if she can't get away with implementing her craziest ideas. It's the judges.
Yeah.
Because especially now that we've seen that they can come up with excuses for why it's okay for the government to pressure a third party to censor you. The more we get of that, the worse society will be. So even just that one issue is a big problem.
Oh, there's no question about it. There's a great op-ed in today's Wall Street Journal about that Monday, the 26th. A wonderful piece about how this Schumer and the rest of the Democrats would be perverting the Constitution if they tried to expand it or have some rules that the Congress promulgates about the Supreme Court. They don't believe in the separation of powers. This is probably the greatest danger of a Harris presidency, that they would try to really either pack the courts or oversee the courts in a way that would be unconstitutional. So again, the courts, we're always told that the courts are important. I think it could be more important the next 4 years if a Harris presidency comes to being. That's why if people want to make sure that at least we don't increase the power of the federal government and we keep the courts as independent as possible, then of course the choice is obvious. But again, I've gotten to the point, Tom, at this stage of my life that you've got to make choices in your own life of how to insulate yourself from what goes on in Washington. And if you run a business, you've got worries. If you're an employee, you've got challenges. If you're a major corporation, they're going to throw antitrust and all these other regulations at you. And of course, in foreign policy, I mean, we are on the brink of World War III. And I think RFK Jr. could make the case that his father and uncle wanted to prevent war with the Soviet Union. We've got to prevent war with Russia and bringing in Iran into the Mideast. I think they can make a strong case because I think that the American people intuitively, instinctively are anti-war, but they've got to make a strong case for that.
Well, we certainly will see. Now, if those of you who might be interested in attending the November 9th event, I will link to it in the description of the video, also at tomwoods.com/2537. And if you want to just go directly to the Mises website, mises.org, just go to the events page, which is mises.org/events, and you'll find the event there. Well, Murray Sabrin, always great talking to you. Thank you very much.
Great to be with you, Tom.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.